Hi, I'm Sunny from Off the Record Lounge, and welcome back to How to Folk Punk. This is episode 2. I have interviewed Browny from Sydney City Trash, and I'm so excited about sharing this interview with you guys because, as you might know, Sydney City Trash haven't been together for quite a while now, so we might hear some golden stories that haven't been shared yet. And on top of that, I have more exciting news for any Sydney City Trash fans out there. Brownie is doing a full Sydney City Trash set solo for the Roots and Jar Belgium online festival. This is streaming at 4 a.m. Sydney, Melbourne time here on the 26th of September, which is 8 p.m. on the 25th of September in Belgium. But don't worry if you're here in Australia and you don't want to get up that early to watch it, because it is available 24 hours after it streams, so you can catch it at a reasonable time of day. Other than that, let's get into the interview.
Kangaroo around here too. Actually, there's a little wallaby in the bushes, so
Oh,
hopefully it'll
is
turn
there?
up while we're
Oh,
talking.
you got a
Yeah,
friend. Awesome.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so the first question I asked was going to ask was about solo work because you guys have all split up now, obviously, and yeah, what's everyone doing?
You've got. I'm pretty close to. I'm outside of Ballina, and that's sort of the Byron Shire kind of area. People from here would hate me saying that. So there's a bit of a there's a bit of a Lismore's nearby, and there's a big music school there, and so there are a lot of musos that come out of there. There's actually a pretty healthy music scene, and it's probably right up your alley. It's kind of all like people that come out of the trees and bring their banjos and stuff, and
Yeah, perfect.
so there's a lot of that going on. And so Jim Mongrel, the bass player from the Trash, moved up here about 5 years ago, and he had some friends from Wollongong and from Sydney that they already had a connection to that scene here, and so he's sort of put something together, I guess, in the last 3 years. But really, it's come to fruition, in the last kind of 18 months. I say 18 months, but this COVID thing's kind of messed up time a little bit for everybody. He's probably been doing it more with his particular band, the Paid Protesters, for about 3 years. So Jamie's here. I don't really do a lot. I'm kind of more of a hired gun. I work for Troubadour Music, Troubadour Entertainment, um,
Okay, yeah.
and Troubadour Touring. It's all been amalgamated. I'm all confused by what it's supposed to be called, what I'm supposed to be telling you. But Troubadour Touring bring out a lot of international artists, Irish. It's an Irish touring company, and so I'm kind of a hired gun for those guys, with whoever it might be. Mostly Damien Dempsey and Gary Ogg from Ireland and Scotland, respectively. But I'm also working with Paddy McHugh. We've been playing together for about 25 years now, maybe longer. And so, yeah, I've done a fair bit of work with Paddy. Most recently, his album Citybound Trains, and he's currently working on something new. And then it sort of splits off in all other directions. You've got Aussie Citizen. He's over in Adelaide, and he's actually running Troubadour from there, running the touring side of things. So he and I are the rhythm section, the powerhouse of the Troubadour touring band. So he's working out of there. We've got Jim Bones in Melbourne, who is it's like a brain surgeon, neuroscientist.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah, and so he's been in Melbourne for about probably 8 years, and he's recently just moved to country Victoria, but he established, a pretty cool Melbourne's, like it's an arts city, so he's got a pretty cool. I don't know if they do it anymore. A pretty cool kind of. I don't know how to describe that type of music. It's like that arty theatre rock, like Tom Waits does.
Oh
That type
yeah,
of stuff.
okay.
I don't want to compare him to Tom Waits. It's called the Broadside Push, and that was the most recent thing that he was working on, and that was a really quite an interesting, cool, very musical band. Um, and so I think that's all of us. I've left off Mitch Hell because he's back in Tamworth. He's just kind of hanging out, doing uni. I don't know, like we sort of, unfortunately, everyone kind of grew up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of coincided with like spending 16 hours in a tour van between gigs is all right
Yeah.
when you're like 18, 25. And then from there on, you want to fly everywhere and you want hotels. And Nobody wants to
Yeah.
pay that in Australia. So we all had to go and get haircuts and real jobs.
Yeah, I guess that leads into my next question I had actually. I was going to ask, what's probably the most valuable lesson you think you've learned from working in like a group of people where you've all got different creative ideals or, yeah.
Respect each other's, I guess, like really try and understand. It's about communication essentially, like any working relationship, be it a marriage or just a spousal relationship or even a business relationship. It's about effective communication. But we were young, big egos, but we love each other very much, and so we sort of had a bit of a, we had a very democratic process towards anything, booking, even writing. Writing was very democratic, particularly in the way that there were 6 of us, but sort of, I think it's okay to say this, like I would produce most of the musical ideas, the majority of them. Mitch would bring all of the lyrics and the kind of the song vibes, and Paddy would glue it all together. And then you'd have, at the time it was Gus and Pig and Jim Bones and eventually Jim Mongrel and Ozzy. And, from the start, from the first record, from the first kind of setup of the band, the idea was that these musical ideas that I bring are just that. They're only ideas without the work that goes into turning them into a song. And it's the same for Mitch's lyrics. Like, he's a brilliant frontman and a brilliant songwriter, but he doesn't play an instrument, unfortunately. And so we couldn't produce any of the stuff that we produced without really kind of being excited about the ideas that each other are bringing to the table and listening and trying not to try not to trip over your dick on the way into the studio. You know what I mean? Like, kind of just relax. Like, it's okay to kind of, to just experiment a little bit, and things don't have to be as rigid as they are in here in your mind. If you want something to sound the way that it sounds in your mind, go do it yourself. So I think one of the main things is, really listening and really respecting each other's creativity and being excited about it.
Yeah, definitely. I like that one. I haven't sort of heard it be put in that way before.
Rambly, nice and rambly.
Yeah, perfect for an interview. I was going to ask about a tour. Did you have a fun tour story you have to share? A bit of a crazy moment?
Holy shit, there are so many. So the Trash spent so long on the road, so long, that I think I may have aged horribly between the ages of about 17 and 25. It's the amount of, because it's not easy. It's not easy at all. There are many, many stories, but I do mostly, when I think back about touring, there's Trash specific stuff that's really, I could write a book about it, but there's one particular tour that I think about that involves Run for Cover, which is Jim Mongrel's old hardcore band. And so we had the 2 bands, Sydney City Trash and Run for Cover, who we're brothers in arms, we're East Coast loose cannons. We were all really tight, we're a family. And so we were on board. Our friend Wayne had a coaster, like a 20-seater coaster. And he used to tour bands around Australia in that thing. And so he just thought, well, yeah, whatever, I'll chuck you guys on board. And so I think we booked about, 13 shows over 2 weeks or something. But it was it was massive. It'd be, if we were in a city, we'd do 2 shows, one on the outskirts of whatever town, say it was Gold Coast, Brisbane, and then we'd get straight back in the car, and it didn't make any sense geographically. We'd go then to Wollongong, back up to Sydney, then go to Canberra, then go to wherever. So on the way down to Victoria, we're already running pretty tight. We've got about, I guess, 4 hours until the border. And from the border, it's 3 hours to Melbourne. We've got about exactly that amount of time to get there, sound check. And that's it, basically, just what the show starts. We were doing a sound check right before doors, which is really annoying, not a good way to go. So, you got 20 guys on there, we're all partying. The drivers have changed somewhere in the middle of the night. Most of the band are asleep. And we sort of wake up. We wake up because the bus is rattling. It's just rattling along, and everyone sort of wakes up, and we're on this dirt road and kind of scratching our heads. We turn around, and this dirt road's a big, long, straight Victorian dirt road, so we can see the dust plume about 50 kilometres behind us. I'm like, where the fuck are we? Is it all right to swear?
Yeah, yeah.
Where are we? Like, what's going on? And so what's happened is, I think it was Mez, the guitarist in Run for Cover, was driving, and he's seen that this is an old coaster that can only go 90 k's an hour, and it's loaded up with 2 bands and all our gear. And so he sees the old girl is it's getting a bit low on juice, and he's found a sign on the side of the road saying, giving the next service station, last servo for 70 k's. So he estimates there's probably only about 30 k's worth of fuel left. I'll just turn down this road, and there's a little town down there, according to, I guess this is like 2009 maps. So very unreliable. So yeah, we're driving along. So we're driving for another 30 kilometres before we realised that we're in the bloody middle of nowhere in just rural Victoria. So we actually stopped and asked a bloke on a tractor who gave the classic, well, you got to go 4 miles down that way, and there's a shed with a big blue thing, and and I think at one point we found a dude, like a motorcycle guy, like a motocross guy. He came along and he kind of helped us out a bit, but he was like a pro motorcycle guy who just lived there in the middle of Victoria because he could have his bikes out there and stuff. Anyway, Swanpool is the name of the little town that we arrived at, which is one of these gaffs that's the video store, service station, post office, bottle shop, supermarket, everything are in the service station, because otherwise it's just farms. And we get there and there's no diesel. That's it, no diesel, and we're out of fuel. And so, yeah, we start freaking out, like, well, that's it, we're screwed. And so we asked the teller, she says she made the phone call about 3 weeks ago. And the diesel will show up anytime between when she made the phone call and when they get here.
Yeah, right.
So we start freaking out. So we're about to start kicking the shit out of each other. Like, it turned to Lord of the Flies very quickly. we all got pitted against each other very quickly. 2 of us decided we'd go over and suss out the biofuel availability to see if we could work out a way to siphon the chip fat out of the chipper that was in there in the service station. So we're working that out. We're just about to set up our plan. It'll be enough to get us up onto the main road, and then we can, sort it out from there, get a tow. And we all walk outside, and there's the truckie. And he's not only pumping up the main tank, he's pumping up our bus for us. And we're all just standing there like, what the fuck just happened? Like, where did you come from? It's like, oh, one of these real rural blokes. He's like, I bet you blokes are happy to see me. They're like, well, yeah. What are you doing here? We heard that you weren't. So what had happened was, he had driven past us on the highway. He saw, because we're both slow-moving vehicles, he saw a bunch of musos, punks, just studs and spikes and tattoos and shit everywhere, and all the band equipment. And then as he sort of got past us, he saw us turn off and go down this dirt road, and he thought, oh, that's trouble. That's trouble. That's Wolf Creek waiting to happen, So he turned around and followed us. And so that's the reason. So, yeah, we ended up making it to this show purely because, just an old bloke in a diesel truck decided, I don't think punks should go down a dirt road in the middle of nowhere, you look a bit lost, boys. But I don't know, for some reason that one sticks out. There are so many more, and there's probably a million better stories. And, if I didn't ramble so much, I'd probably get to them. But
yeah, no, that one's nice. I
maybe
enjoyed
I'll
that.
write a book.
Yeah, you should. That feels very Australian, that story, for sure. Say, because folk punk is so DIY, based around doing it all yourself, do you have sort of a story to share as well that's sort of like, oh, that's probably like a big thing that we, really did ourselves, that was really DIY? Something that stands out where you're like, that was awesome that we did that all by ourselves?
Yeah, I think we did kind of everything by ourselves. I think the thing that I just had a bit of a flashback to when we first did our run of merch, of shirts, and Mitch was Mitch's girlfriend at the time was, you know, very Aussie, Chinese Australian girl. And it was just funny. Like she was tiny and she rocked the merch really well. And, you know, like she was part of the band. But I just remember like we had a basement in Redfern. That was our studio. And I remember coming home one day and I'd forgotten all about the merch run. And so we would, you know, it's DIY. So we had the emulsion screen and someone had to go through and iron on the emulsion. So I go down to the basement and there's 60 or 70 shirts hanging up and like 50 jumpers. And then there's all the other stuff. And in the middle of it, there's like all this steam and shit everywhere. And there's just this tiny little Asian woman like ironing all the stuff on. I just looked like a full sweatshop, you know. But I think in general, the DIY thing, we funded our own tours. We got to a point where, you know, the only money you were going to lose on a tour is the days that you had to take off work. I think that's the raddest thing is to make sure that you're treating your band, you know, it doesn't have to be corporate, just to treat it like a business in such, like you do want to get to a point where you don't lose any money, where you don't have to put your own money into it anymore, where it can be self-sufficient. And I think kind of realizing that from the get-go was very important. Because towards the end, I think the last, I don't know, maybe 5 years of the Trash was all self-funded. You know,
Yeah,
we
that's
always had a
awesome.
kitty there, and and all that is just it's that respecting each other's ideas of how to steer the ship. I think that really, I don't know if that's really a good DIY story because I see. You know, like you do your own posters, you go around and put them up, you get in trouble, they tear them down, like, you know, you slap stickers all around the place. But I see like the folk punks like this, because it's kind of new to me. I never really thought about folk punk that much. There's definitely a flavour, and the Tassie crowd are definitely it. But they make their own pants, man. Like they make their own everything. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like that nowadays because, you know, I'm doing heaps of traveling on my own and stuff like that. But I mean, they seriously, like, they would literally just come out of the trees. Like that's where they lived. They lived in tree houses and shit, you know. So I think, generally just making sure that that everybody's not having to dip into their own pockets too much, really. I don't know if that answers your question or it sort of poses another one, but I think, running it like a business was very important.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's good. So because you've been sort of in the folk punk scene, even if you sort of didn't really consider or think about your genre when you first started, how would you say the scene has changed over the years, if it has changed at all?
I think, my experience with the people, and I think it's because of, I don't know why, but I think it might have something to do with the fact that we have an existing crowd for our solo endeavors. So there are people who will come from the Trash to check out Paddy McHugh. So I'm sort of getting, when you go and do gigs and you're in the town for a night and then you go and do another night somewhere else, sort of, you don't really get to, you got to pick your people kind of thing. And it's usually people that are, you become close with the people that are associated with the people who got you there in the first place. So I'm really tight with a family in Tasmania, with the Johnsons and Churchills, because they were always sort of involved in getting us to Tasmania. So when I go to Tassie, I hang out with those guys. I make a special effort to spend some time with the family. And it's only recently that I've been going down there on my own that, or even doing gigs with Paddy, that, I'm starting to get to know some of the folk punk crowd, who they are as people. So I don't really have a reference except for the Tassie crowd that I've known for at least 15 years. And I'd say I know I've gotten older, but it does seem like they've gotten younger. It seems like there are a lot of it really does seem like there are a lot of like younger people in the scene. Like, I mean, 16 through to 18.
Yeah. Do you reckon
Like,
it's sort of getting bigger a little bit?
yeah, and I do, and I think they make up, like, the 16 to 20-year-olds kind of make up a large percentage of those crowds, and then you've got your kind of people that have been in it for a little while. So it seems like, I think it could just be that I'm noticing it more, but there also seem to be a lot more bands. Like, when we were down for that Hobo Fopo, that Days and Days band, who were
Yeah.
they were lovely. They were really cool. I didn't get to see them, unfortunately. I think we were playing at the same time, but they were rad. They were good people to hang out with. But they were worshipped,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, definitely. They're probably
and I didn't
one of
quite
the biggest
understand
at
it.
the moment.
But I guess people, like, they really, I don't want to say worshipped, but people do really, really like the Trash. And I don't understand that either. So, yeah, I think maybe I'm only noticing that people are younger because I'm older. But it seems like the bands are actually younger as well. And it seems like there's, I don't know, like, maybe,
Well, you were
I
sort
don't
of
think,
17 when you first started it. Did you
yeah,
say?
I was.
Yeah.
I was. And that kind of crowd came a bit later. Like, I didn't know the Crusties until later. I only knew punks, sort
Yeah,
of
yeah,
thing.
right.
Or I don't know if fezzes is a derogatory term, the ferals, like, I didn't know the fezzes until we started hanging out in Tassie, and some of the Blue Mountains crowd are a bit fezzer. But they've always been really progressive people. I think that's a really important thing. And so if you couple that progressive nature, the progressive political nature of the individuals with youth, in particular young people in 2020, maybe I am noticing that there's a more militant, it's going to sound like an oxymoron, but there's a more militant approach to ultimately peace and harmony. They seem very, very, like, bigotry has never been an issue with anyone that I've ever known from that scene in general, but there seems to be a militant kind of, we are anti-bigot. We wear it
Yeah.
very proudly. And we don't really need to talk about it much. You already know that's who we are by the way we dress and the music that we listen to, which I really like. And I get that out of the punk scene anyway. Like, classic examples of that are the Wollongong punks. Like, us Sydney punks just dress like skaters. We're mostly skateboarders anyway. Like, we don't look like anything. I just look like some farmer yobbo idiot now anyway. Do you know what I mean? But the Wollongong punks would go all out. They'd be studs and spikes and mohawks. And that comes from, and this isn't just anecdotal, this is people from the scene telling me this. It comes from it being a really rough town. It's a working class town with a waning steel industry that's been on its way out over the last 20, 30 years. And, with that comes problems. Like, you get a lot of crime and you get just rough-head idiots that don't like, I guess, they don't like different people. And so a good example of that is my cousin Loki Stew. He's, is it Yarran? I think it's Yarran. He's originally anyway from Wollongong. And so he already sticks out. He's a black man, a big black man. But he'll go that extra mile, studs and spikes and a mohawk. And it's because if he's walking home on his own and he sees someone else wearing that, well, it's a badge, isn't it? It's like, we're gonna look after each other as we cross the road,
Yeah,
sort of
definitely.
thing, And I think that's very present with the folkies, the folk punks. But I think that's kind of, I don't know, I think that's kind of present with all punk, really.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
we've got to look after each other and stick together. Yeah.
Yeah, supports.
I'm giving you some long ass answers here, aren't I, Sonny?
So what attracted you to punk or folk punk? What really got you into it?
I think being young and easily, like, when you're young, especially growing up in a small town, you sort of have a choice. You're going to be angry anyway because you're young, and you're looking to belong as well. And so I was always looking to belong, but I'm a skater. So, and skateboarding was big. It was a boom at the time as well. So I just had, like, I knew anybody with a skateboard was my friend. And there was a lot of kids that were skating back in Tamworth. But with that, you'd be introduced to some of the older dudes, like some of the expats, if you will. They'd come down and they'd skate in a different way. They'd skate like they'd seen something, you
Yeah.
know, like you get these shredders that had been hitting up bowls and just stuff that we didn't have. We were all street skaters in Tamworth, and they had a different style. And so I'd always pick their brains and talk to them about why they ride the way they do and stuff. And back then, nobody had tattoos, so they'd always have some tattoo somewhere, you know, like a lightning bolt or thrasher shit or whatever, like, you know. And it was just, I don't know, those dudes would be interesting. And so they would be, whenever I'd see them, like usually in holiday time, I'd kind of gravitate towards those older kids. Not kids, they were like in their 20s, you know. One of them was Mitch Hell from the Trash. And so Mitch and I have a bit of an interesting story anyway, where his dad and my grandfather were quite good friends, and they shared a Clydesdale. And so when we first met, we had this whole argument about who owns the horse. You know, it's such a country thing. Like, we're in the middle of Sydney, and he's going, "Oh, g'day, it's my Clydesdale, bloody, that lives on this paddock." You know, it's so weird, like these two punks arguing over a horse. But it was back when you had record stores. There was one in Tamworth called Mudbox Music or Mudbox Records, an independent record store in a country town. Who would have thunk it? Crazy talk. And, you know, I used to see him. He'd come back on the holidays from Sydney or Wollongong, wherever he was living, and he had tattoos, and he was one of these one of these different looking skaters. And, yeah, I just see him going into the record shop, and I just followed him in one day. Like, I went in after him and just went, whatever he got, I'll get the same records, please. So I ordered a couple of records in, and I couldn't pay for them. I was too poor. And so I told one of the older dudes about what I was trying to do, and he's like, "What? Dead Kennedys? You know, you like them? Oh, you're gonna love this band then." And put me on to, I don't know, whatever else, Circle Jerks, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember straight away going, so I couldn't pay for these records, but I had a friend who his dad was into punk, and he had a lot of records, and I had a lot of hip hop records. And so I went and talked to his dad, and I swapped him I wish I didn't now, it'd be great to have it, a Beastie Boys Ill Communication vinyl for fresh fruit for rotting vegetables. And that was it. I was like, you know, I didn't have a vinyl player, so I had to go to my grandfather's place and play it on the back of, he's playing all these old polka records. You can imagine like a gramophone with a big brass horn thing that's used to like old people music, like really old people. And then all of a sudden it's like, California, Uber us, you know? And yeah, I saw the reaction that it would get from people too. Like, and I just felt, I don't know, like I felt like, wow, this is some crazy new shit. And I was young, I was really into politics, or getting into it. I've been going to protests at Armidale University. It just felt like this is the music for me. I was listening to Rage Against the Machine a lot, you know, like this is the music for me to take it that one step further. And yeah, and so then eventually got to Sydney, and Mitch is the source. Mitch Hell is the absolute source. He always has been. He's a couple of years ahead of the curve as far as trends go. He always has been. And especially for finding music. And so he introduced me to Reagan Youth, and then that was it. I was like, holy shit, like hardcore punk rock, that's my thing now. But then, yeah, moving to Sydney and going back to that kind of noticing that people, it's sort of unfortunate, but it's kind of good too. I'd go to gigs and I didn't give a fuck because I didn't really know how to be a punk. I just knew that I liked the music. I sort of, you know what I mean? Like you feel like you should be doing something. Because I'd look around the room at these gigs, and there was lots of like people standing there with their arms crossed, looking at everybody else's t-shirts. And I didn't.
Yeah.
Do you know that thing? And it still happens, eh? Like,
yeah, definitely.
But depending on the town, like in Sydney, it was very much a like when the Trash first started playing. You know, the Skins would be over there, the goths are up the back, the punks are over there, and all the hardcore kids are just standing around looking at each other's shirts.
Yeah.
And eventually they realize, you know, like, we don't give a fuck. And so they just start dancing together, and you'd have these huge gigs because everybody would come along. You didn't have to say it was a punk show. You just said it was a show. And it meant everybody from every scene would come along. We were really good at doing that. But I still sort of would do it. I'd be skating in the city, and I'd find the first some kid would have a Bad Brain shirt, and I just want to go and talk to them.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
because it would identify them as different, like me, and it's sort of weird because, you know, no, they're the same. They're the same as me. Like, you know, like we're all just kids here, and we're all trying to find our way. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've gone on too much of a tangent there, but what was your original question?
Oh, I forgot too now. What was it? Oh, how you got into
So anyway,
punk.
I was wearing an onion for a belt, which was the fashion at the time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, I have one last question and then I can let you go. The question was,
Oh, one more question. I'm enjoying talking to you or talking at you.
we can chat a bit longer if you want after. This is just the last question for the interview, which is
Cool.
any pop song at the moment. What pop song do you think would be awesome for a folk band or folk punk band to cover?
Oh man, I'm so shit at what's on the radio. I don't ever know what's on the radio. So I haven't actually heard the song. I just really like the attitude. It's what's her name? Is it Cardi B?
Yes.
And it's some song about like big wet pussies or whatever.
Yeah. That would
I haven't
be
actually heard the
awesome.
song. I heard Blind Boy talking about it on his podcast, and I was like, oh, that's sick. That sounds like a punk song anyway. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
so
You got to listen
I'll
to
have a
that.
listen. Yeah, I'll listen to it now. Yeah, but oh man, I wish I had time to think about that. I could have brought up like maybe a classic pop song or something.
No, that's
Instead of
a
folk punk.
perfect answer. I'd love to see that too.
Cool.